Welcome to Riveted Rock Band on Beaducation.com. My name is Kriss Silva, and I'd like to thank you for taking this class and tell you a little bit about it. Riveted Rock Band was named by my husband. One day I was making some jewelry and learning from Lisa, Niv, and Kelly some stamping techniques. I decided to make some rings using the flat wire and incorporating some large hole gemstones and incorporating riveting and rocks. My husband's in a rock band, so he's like, hey, it's a cool riveted rock band. And I'm like, that's the name. So there we go. We're gonna learn a lot. We're gonna learn how to, amongst other things, rivet. We're gonna learn to stamp, file, remove fire scale, anneal metal, sterling silver, and make some fancy bald head pins and splaying the metal so you have a couple different looks. Watch this all the way through. There's a lot of important information. I highly recommend watch it all the way through to the end, then start your project. You'll have better success that way. Tools and materials for a riveted rock band. We will be using the setup for two reasons. We'll be making a bald head pin, and we'll also be using it to anneal the flat wire. So you will need a kiln brick, your micro torch, and butane, of course, and a cooling cup with its self-locking tweezers, and then don't forget your sheet metal for protection. Here are some more tools we'll be using. We have a plastic mallet. You may also use a rubber or rawhide mallet, a riveting hammer, a steel ring mandrel, preferably with sizing, a bench block, a rubber block, and a vise. We will use the rubber mallet for shaping and not texturing, the riveting hammer for riveting the gem onto the flat wire. For sizing, we'll be using our ring mandrel, and for stamping on front and back of our flat wire, we'll be using our bench block. For filing, definitely recommend this rubber block. And then the vise we'll be using for an optional project, which is to rivet the bald head pin. So you may use the ball as a ball, or you may splay the metal so that it has like a nail head on it that you may also decorate. We'll also be using files to round out the edges of the flat wire, some design stamps. You may also use letter and number stamps. I have a chain nose plier here that I use for some holding and gripping, a razor flush wire cutter, the Tronics 7223. I use that for cutting the wire to rivet it perfectly flat. The large wrap and tap plier for shaping the flat wire into a round ring. And then this is a heavy duty cutter to cut flat wire, and we call it online, we call it the Fat Daddy, and it's just a Kiba cutter. It cuts the wire flush, so you have minimal filing to do. If you don't have a heavy cutter for flat wire, then we recommend sawing it. And also this is the screw down hole punch. It makes two different sizes of holes, a 14 gauge and a 10 gauge, so that you have the option to rivet with either a 10 gauge wire or a 14 gauge wire. I'm also using or demonstrating using some fine sandpaper to smooth out the edges of the ends of the flat wire. This is just some sandpaper. It's about a 400 grit sandpaper, or it can even be finer if you choose. And I just wrap it around a wooden square dowel that I get at the hardware store. What I do is I tape the ends, and when I'm done using a portion of it, then I just rip this off, and I have a whole new portion that's ready to be used. These are some optional tools that you can use in class. This is a diamond bead reamer, and this is an electric bead reamer. It's really hard to find beads that will have a large enough hole to rivet, especially gemstones or pearls. So I do demo it, and this is a great one to use not only for beads but also for metal. And I prefer the electric bead reamer to ream out the beads to make the hole large enough for a 14 gauge. And I also use this electric reamer for enlarging the hole in the bead just a little bit. To complete this project, you will need the following. I use a flat wire. This is a 5mm by 1.5mm, and this is a 7mm by 1mm. I actually prefer this one because it's a lot easier to manipulate and to bend. This flat wire, I really like it. It has rolled edges so that it has a cleaner finish and it's not sharp. And also you see it really good on the 5mm. The 7mm, because it's so flat, it has a nice squared edge to it, but it's not sharp. It's really nice. We also recommend using a polishing pad with some micro abrasion to it, so you have a really high shine, a really high polish. 14 gauge fine silver wire, and any bead you choose to use. I prefer a flat bead with at least a 14 gauge hole or larger. Here we have a great selection of gemstones and pearls that are great for this project. I like to look for beads that have a perfect thickness. It's not too thick, not too thin. I would say that this one's a little chunky. Some people like that, but you don't want to go any thinner than this. This width is really good. Rings get a lot of abuse, and so that's something that you want to look at. You don't want to get anything too thin, like this little carnelian one. Sometimes though, I'll stack them together to give them a little bit of strength. But some of these are from just your local bead store that I've reamed out, and some of the beauties here are from a dealer that you can find at some of the nicer trade shows, and his name is Gary Wilson. So here are some design ideas, not just with using beads, but also with rivet heads. This gemstone here, this is a green tourmaline. This is a chrysocolla. I have some turquoise here. This is the actual sample that we'll be teaching you to do in class. And this one I like. This one's an iolite stacked on top of a mother of pearl here. And this is a chrysoprase, one of my favorite gemstones. And then this one, I will not be covering it in class, but it has a sterling silver blank backing that you can embellish front and back. And it's basically going to be done the same way as adding a bead. You just have to hole punch the blank right in the middle and then just thread it through as a backing. And it looks really nice from the side. The last bead I showed you, or the last ring I showed you, had a sterling silver blank underneath it, and I just pulled some blanks out to show you how easy it is to incorporate these into your design work. We sell all these great design blanks on our shop site, and these are just a few examples. Whenever I use a clear bead, this is a citrine, but you can really see through it. You can actually do, I've actually like stamped punk rock or maybe somebody's name, and then when it's oxidized, you can see it through the gemstone. That actually comes out really cool. And on this one, for example, this flower with a coin pearl, you can do, like little tiny spirals or just some design work around the edges there. So there's some ways that you can individualize your riveted rock band. So have that be an option for you as well. I'm going to show you how to take a flat shaped bead with the hole through the center. Usually a gemstone or a pearl. This technique works great for these two types of beads. We're going to ream out, this is about a 26 gauge hole. We're going to ream it out to a 10 gauge hole. I'm going to show you how to do that using an electric bead reamer. What I'm going to show you is how to use an electric bead reamer. This gets plugged in. It has one speed. These are sold at Beaducation.com. It's a really great tool. It has a very low speed. It comes with 3 different types of reamer sets and an extra collet. This is really just for gemstones and freshwater pearls. It's not a very fast moving motor, so it's going to be limited in what type of beads you can use, so they should be soft. How this works is you push down on this button, and it's going to allow you to open up this collet in order for us to put in a reaming bit. This will give you up to a size 10 gauge hole if we ream it all the way down. So I'm not going to push it all the way down. I'm going to leave some of it showing. Now I'm going to let go of this button. Actually, not yet. I'm going to leave that button pushed in so that I'm able to lock this into place. Just want to make sure that's not all the way down. Perfect. So now I can let go of the button, and now this is going to be able to be reamed. This is in there really tight. What we're going to be doing is reaming our bead, or in this case our freshwater pearl, using water. Now the motor is up here, and the only thing that's going to hit the water is the tip of the reaming bit and the bead. The drill itself does not get immersed in water, and that's something that a lot of people have questions about. How is it that you don't get electrocuted? Again, we are not inserting the the actual motor into the water, just these two pieces will be in the water. The reason that this has to be submerged in water is two reasons. One, friction. The drill, even though it's not going very quick, very fast, it heats up the bead. It prevents the bead from getting any larger. The heat can also cause the bit to break, and then this piece gets stuck in your bead, and then you can no longer use it. So again, water helps with the friction and the heat, and also whatever powder or residue that is coming out of the bead is going to be in the water and not something that you're going to breathe. So it's going to be safe for you. And also, by keeping the drill bit wet, you're going to see me taking the bead off and seeing some white residue. I'm going to take it off. That also helps keep the diamond dust that's on here. It helps it stay sharper longer. So it's using it dry takes this bit off, and then it no longer works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the drill bit, and I'm going to actually turn it on with the bead in place. Since I've already wet everything, I don't actually have to submerge it just yet. It actually helps to submerge it, make sure it's all wet, turn it on. Once it's on, then I can go ahead and place it in the water. I want to be able to use the action of coming in and out. You're going to see residue come out of the bead, and you're going to see this getting all white. The residue is going to want to stick to the drill bit. You want to make sure that every now and then you take that off and wet it one more time. So now I'm going to turn it on with the bead actually in the drill bit. I'm going to turn it on now. I'm going to put it in the water. I'm actually using this black rubber block to rest it against, so I'm not just freehanding it in the water. And you'll notice that I'm going in and out, and you'll see some white residue. Now I'm going to stop. There's no white residue in there yet, but now I'm going to flip my bead over, and I actually feel that this helps to ream the bead out quicker rather than just doing it from one side. So again, I like to go in and out, not all the time, but when I feel that it's not moving or it feels stuck, I kind of move it in and out, and then I kind of let it go. Now, I don't want you to push the drill bit into the bead. The actual just holding it in place will do the job just fine. If you push it into the bead, this is what happens. It stops working. There's too much pressure on there. So now I have to turn it off, try to move the bead off because it's on there too tight. There. Now take off the white residue, place it back in the bead, lay it on the block for support, turn it on, and now I'm applying too much pressure. Do it one more time. So again, just in and out when you feel like it's not moving, and if you just kind of lay it in place without pushing it towards the bead, you'll feel it actually moving on its own. You can see how much bigger the hole's already getting. We've only just done this maybe not even a minute. So now I'm going to turn my bead around, and I'm going to keep going until my bead gets pushed all the way to the top, because I do want it to be a 10 gauge hole. Again, I just want to stress the fact that the block is just for something to lean against, for the bead to lay against. And now that my bead is inserted into the drill bit, now I can go ahead and turn it on. Keep in mind that we want to be able to drill it all the way to the very end of the bit, which is going to make us have, or allow us to have, a 10 gauge hole. And then when it gets stuck like that, just turn it off. And sometimes you'll actually have to push the button. By pushing the button, it prevents the actual bit from moving around. It kind of locks it into place. So now I'm able to slide it off. When the button is not pushed in, this is moving around freely. So it's really hard to get the leverage that you need. So if you need a little bit more leverage, push the button. It locks this into place so it no longer rotates. It just gives you a little bit more leverage in order to take the bead off. So I have 3 pearls here. I just wanted to show that this is about the size hole we started with, which is about a 26 or 24 gauge hole. Within a few seconds, I was able to ream it out, and probably within a minute, I got this size hole, which is about a size maybe 18 or 18 or 16 gauge hole, and then once I've continued going all the way through, this is a 10 gauge hole, maybe even an 8 gauge hole. So it's a pretty large hole. We want it to be really large. We don't want the wire to fit tight on the bead. We want it to be a generous fit. I have a 14 gauge fine silver balled head pin. I'm going to go ahead and insert it just to show you that it fits through the middle bead, but we want it to be a little bit more generous than that. So we do want it to be much bigger. We want it to be generous, a generous hole, just like that. So I'm going to say this is going to give you a lot more options when your hole is a little bit more generous shaped. What you see here is a 14 gauge wire and a 10 gauge wire. I'll be showing you how to make a ball and the difference in the shape of the balls. When I make a balled head pin with thick wire, let's say maybe even a 16 gauge and thicker, so 14 gauge definitely falls within that realm, I like to lay it on a kiln brick. If you've already seen, and you should have already seen the making balled head pins, I won't be spending too much time on how to make these balled head pins because the prereq for this class is the making of the balled head pins using fine silver wire. But I do want to point out that this is going to be a little bit different. When I make balled head pins with fine silver wire in the gauges that I'm using here, 14 and 10, or anything that falls in between, it helps to have the brick so that we can center all the heat on the wire. And I'll be going through that as I'm actually doing the demo. I'm going to start making the balled head pin with the 14 gauge and then I'll move to the 10 gauge. Again, it's better that it's on a kiln brick as opposed to holding it straight up and down with the tool, and I'll go over that with each demo. What you're seeing here is my quench cup. I'm starting with a 14 gauge fine silver wire. That's the one I'll be doing first or demoing first. I also have my self-locking tweezer or a gripping tweezer. Comes with the cooling cup. What I'm going to be demoing is how to make a ball, but not just a balled head pin, but a centered ball. And this is really important because when we go to rivet, that ball has to be right in the center of the bead. It can't be off to the side like a P shape. So again, I have my quenching cup, my gripping tweezers or self-locking tweezers, and I have about 4 inches of 14 gauge fine silver wire. One of the reasons I like to use a little bit longer, let's say my head pin is really only going to be ½ an inch long. Keep in mind that the ball, depending on how long you want it or how big you want the ball, you can have anywhere from ½ an inch to 3/4 of an inch of this gauge wire eaten up just by shaping that ball. And then keep in mind that the shorter the wire is, the length of the wire, the hotter it gets. So if my wire were any shorter than this, it would just want to turn into a ball. It wouldn't allow me to have a ball on one end and then a straight wire on the other. So 4 inches would be the shortest amount of wire I'd work with. I usually work with about 6 inches, and that allows me to make 2 head pins, 2 balled head pins, one on each side, and then I cut it in half. So right now I'll demo making the ball. I'm going to be using my butane torch. You should already know all the safety precautions with using a torch. Turning it on, I'm going to make sure that you're going to see us zoom in. I want to make sure that the hottest part of the flame, which is where the light blue and the dark blue flame meet, you can see my wire turning orange. I'm going to rotate that. I'm not going to just keep it straight. I'm going to kind of rotate or round, make like a little round circle with my torch. And the reason I do that is sometimes it allows me to heat it up faster. Gives me a lot better angles. You'll see that the ball is already starting to form. And notice that I'm no longer head on, because what that is going to do is it's going to keep the ball growing. And I don't want it to grow yet. I want to shape it. So now I'm ready to shape or center the ball. So using my gripping tweezer, I'm rotating it, almost like you're making a lampwork bead. So as my ball is growing and being shaped, I'm rotating it, keeping in mind that that ball should be as centered as possible. Once you start losing control, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what happens if you heat it up too quickly. It starts to drip. That means that there's too much heat on one side and it's not going to form unless you keep rotating it. You can see how it just changed shape and it's starting to grow. The simplest way to control it is to let go of the heat. You'll see my flame is not on the ball but away from it. I'm letting it cool off. Now I can go ahead and continue to shape. You can see it kind of has a P shape right here. If you turn it to the side, right there, it looks like a P. It has like a little rounded section. We want to be able to center that ball now. So now with the highest part is pointing upwards, I want to be able to heat the ball back up again to melting point and let the ball rotate to the other side or kind of fall to the other side. One of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to use your self-locking tweezer and place it on the wire, because this will siphon the heat, which will prevent you from actually heating up your metal and shaping it. So you only want to touch it when you need to change the side of the heat, wherever you're pointing the side of the heat, but you don't want to keep the tweezers on the wire as you're melting it. You only want to do that when you need to move the head pin. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to continue to shape it. What you're looking at is my 14 gauge wire that I've balled. You can see it has a really good ball on one side, but then I rotate it and you can see how it's not centered on the other side. So it's almost like a P shape. So what I'm going to do is work on it a little bit more and make sure that that ball is completely centered, so there's an even amount of ball formed around the whole thing, so it looks like a ball on a wire. So what I've done is worked on the ball a little bit and I've centered it. I wanted to slide the bead on there to show you what it should look like next to your bead. It should be large, it should not be small. And just as a preempt, I just want to let you know the ball not only serves as a decoration, but it also serves as a protection for the bead when you go to rivet it later on. So the ball should be generous. Also, if you wanted to shape your ball and rivet it flat like a little nail head, then the ball should also be large for that purpose as well. This ball here is about a 4mm diameter in size, so it should be about that size or larger, and it should not be any smaller than that. I've just shown you how to make a balled head pin, a centered balled head pin, and now I'm going to show you how to form that and splay it flat like a nail head. Now you have the option of using both or either techniques, and I'm going to show you a finished sample of both. So here's a sample of a splayed project. So it allows you to have space to stamp and gives you different types of shapes. So it doesn't always have to be round. You can shape that square or triangle. But if you wanted to keep it round, then that can also be a cute design as well. In order to make a splayed balled head pin or a nail head, you'll need these two tools. You'll need a vise and you'll need a riveting hammer. What I will do is demo how to attach this or clamp this onto your table or bench, and then I will do the demonstration on how to splay the metal. What I like to show you is that this has two different cranks. One is to actually attach it to your bench, and the other one is to adjust the vise mouth right here. So what I want to do is I want to close that mouth in order to insert my balled head pin. It should not fall through the cracks, and it shouldn't be loose. It should be somewhat tight. So you can see the actual adjusting. And once I adjust it, we're going to go ahead and change the angle so that you can see what we're looking at and how to splay the metal. What you're looking at is my balled head pin with the ball facing forward or upward. I'm using my riveting hammer. My balled head pin is clamped into this vise. There are no teeth on the inside of this vise, so that it's not going to mar the actual body of the head pin. With this in there tight, it's not loose at all, it's in there really tight. I'm going to use my riveting hammer, and I'm going to be tapping it going in this direction, going in, I should say going in this direction and then going in this direction. So it's called a cross action. And the reason you want to do that is you don't want your, you want to be able to form your nail evenly all the way around and not have it look uneven, unless that's the look you're going for. So now I'm going to go ahead and start the demo. I'm going to start by striking the metal at the very top, striking the ball at the very top here on the top, and then going this way. So when I mean top, it's not just the top of the ball, but looking from top to bottom, it'd be top to bottom that way. Tapping, and you want to be firm. You don't want to just tap, tap, tap. You want to be firm. You can see an oval shape already forming. And now I've tapped that way. Now I'm going to tap the opposite direction. Again, it's called cross action. Excuse the noise. Now you're seeing that it's forming an even shape. It's again forming a nice round circle. What I'd like to do is I'd like to clamp or unclamp the ball just so that you can see what it looks like from the side. So you can see from the side the shape I'm getting. You can see where the pinch is from the vise. And now we're going to rotate the wire so the pinch is going to form in the opposite direction. So that's the side view. What I'd like to mention at this time as well is that you don't want to be having too thin of a nail. The nail should be thick from the side, maybe like a 22 gauge diameter sheet. If it gets any thinner than that, you won't be able to embellish or stamp the top. It will be too weak. Okay, so you can see the pinch from the side, but I want really trying to focus on the thickness of the head pin right there. That's a really good thickness. We can go a little bit thinner. Now I'm going to when I go and clamp it again, I'm going to clamp it going this way. So that pinch that you see there will now be in that direction. Okay, let's get going. Sometimes what I notice too is that when I do that, I want to put the pinch in the opposite direction. My bead wants to rotate because it's bulky there, so it wants to move where it's flat. So just don't let it happen. Try to keep it in the opposite pinch as much as possible. It will turn a little bit and that's okay, but just we don't want it to turn all the way into the pinch. We want to form another pinch on the other side. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same technique, stamp from top to bottom, then turn, stamp from top to bottom. I'm going to stop there. I don't want the nail to get too thin because I do want to be able to stamp something on there. You will also notice quite a few marks that happens with your hammer, and I'm going to show you some techniques on trying to smooth that out so it's really clean and a clean finish, kind of like planishing the silver so that it looks like a mirror finish. What I'd like to show you is sometimes you're going to need to anneal your metal or soften the metal, and you soften it or anneal it by applying heat. To me, it heats up very quickly. Once it turns a bright orange, you're in danger of balling up the metal. So I'm not going to anneal it or heat it to the point of a bright orange. I just want a light orange glow to it. And what that's going to do is it's going to soften the head for me just enough so that I can go ahead and plenish it or chase it, so that it's going to be a smooth texture, but it's still going to be soft enough so that I can go ahead and put a little stamp at the very top of that head. So again, I just want to apply a little heat to it till I get a slight orange glow. And I heat the whole thing up. I like for the whole thing to be soft, not just the tip. You can see that light little tinge. There's my little tinge that I'm talking about. Now I'm done. So I've softened or annealed the head pin so that I'm able to clean up those scratches or those marks. I'm going to use a chasing hammer to just smooth it out, but it's still going to remain a little soft, so that's going to allow me to put a little impression, a little design stamp in there. And let me go ahead and show you. So now I'm going to show you how to use a chasing hammer. We're going to be using the chasing part, not the ball peen part, but the chasing part. We're going to smooth this out so it has a really clean texture. And then I'll show you how to use a design stamp. All I'm going to do is give it a couple of taps, and when I tap it, I'm going to tap or strike and swing outwards. So not just straight up and down. And I don't want to tap too hard, I just want to tap lightly just to smooth out the surface. I don't want to thin the metal. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull it out and show you what it looks like. So you can see that it's got a cleaner face. If the scratches aren't gone, then you just need to tap a few more times. Again, what I want you to concentrate on is not making this too thin. It should be pretty thick. I had mentioned a little while earlier about that pinch that or the groove that the vise makes. You can see the pinch when I turn this and rotate this. I want to address it because what happens is that pinch, it doesn't look like it's wider than the rest of the wire, but it actually tapers and makes it thicker down here. So sometimes your bead doesn't fit just right. So what I like to do is I like to cut that pinch off. What I'm going to do is just using a cutter. I don't know if this will work here, but I just like to take the cutter and just cut that little piece of wire. It's almost like a little burr, so it doesn't take a lot of pressure for that to happen. But again, I just like to take my wire cutter and just trim and trim, and then that just slides right off. So I have a little burr, but the pinch is gone, so we can just file that burr or just cut a little bit cleaner. But that burr really does make a difference. Maybe not right now, but towards the end once we go to actually put the whole bead and rivet together. So I will be demonstrating how to do the design stamp on the silver nail head that we've just formed. I do want to pinpoint that design stamps are a little tricky, especially using designs. They have a little bit more detail, so you want to make sure that you hit it just right so that you're able to get the entire detail on top of your little nail head. So you might want to practice first using like sterling silver, or actually a cheaper version of it would be like some copper sheet or something like that. Keep in mind though that we are hammering on fine silver, not sterling, so it's a little bit softer. So we don't want to strike it too hard, but we still want to strike it so that it's an even impression. So just I definitely recommend that you practice first on the copper and then get to this point. Because if you do mess up at this point, you'd have to basically start all over again with the ball and then starting the nail head and then going back to the design stamp. So right now, using my dead blow hammer, which is what I prefer, it's a little heavier and it has better control so that my design stamp is even and clean. I will also be using a Beaducation exclusive, the Tiny Heart, which is now my favorite. All right, let's get going. I'm going to go ahead and lay this exactly how I want it. Remember, design stamps don't have a top or a bottom or a notch that shows you the top or bottom, so make sure you're placing it where you want it to be. I hold it firmly. I'm going to go ahead using my dead blow hammer and give it a really good even strike. You'll see as we zoom in my little tiny heart. You do risk denting or concaving the metal if you strike it too hard, so just find the happy medium for you, because if you strike it too softly, it's very easy to go back into that impression and just give it one more tap, just a light tap, and I don't usually get a blurred impression when I do that. What you're looking at is what your bead would look like with a bald head pin, and what it would look like with a splayed head pin and the design stamp. On the design stamp, I went ahead and oxidized it so you can see the texture and the design stamp. So I wanted to leave that texture in it. I didn't splay it or planish the wire all the way so it was a smooth finish. I left a little texture in there. But you can have, basically that's a design element that you can choose to have or not have. So these are your options, and now we're going to get started on making the band. Now we're ready to start measuring how much wire we're going to use for a ring. Let me go over some of the measurements. I start with a 6-inch piece of wire. This is a 7mm by 1mm. I am going to show you how I size it for my finger, and then you can adjust it to your size. We want to overlap the wire by 2mm or 1/16 of an inch. Not very much. We're going to take that, we're going to rotate that all the way around your finger and come straight up and hold it between your fingers like that. What I do is I mark it with a Sharpie. I just make a straight line, and it's going to look like that. And then I'm going to measure it one more time. Again, overlapping about 2mm or 1/16 of an inch. It's going to rotate and wrap all the way around my finger, and that should end up, it might be a little long. I'm going to measure it one more time. Again, overlapping 2mm to 1/16, which should be about the same, and that's going to be a little too long. I'm going to actually have this cut right below that line. Because this wire, when it makes a complete circle, it takes up the inside diameter, so we want to measure long. Ideally, you want to be able to have the wire butt up against or come up flush to the other side, or you can have it overlap a little and make it adjustable. I just went ahead and got rid of that second line so that it wouldn't be confusing. I just used a little pro polish pad and cleaned it off. But what I wanted to do is show you that the measurement that I got was about I think like a hair off of 2.5 inches. And what I like to mention is that usually for my size 6 to 6.5 ring finger, I'm usually cutting between 2.25 inch to 2.5 inches for my ring size. And the reason it varies is because it depends on what gauge wire I'm using. If it's a little bit thicker, then I cut a little longer. If it's a little thinner, I cut it pretty close to the size that I want it to be. So in this case, my finished or my end product will be about a size 6.5, and I'm starting with about, I think, just slightly under 2.5 inches. Now I'm ready to cut. What I like to show is that when I cut using this cutter with a short amount of wire, I'm not going to actually use the grip in my wrist to close the cutter. I'm actually going to butt the bottom of the cutter up against the table and push down on the cutter so that that pressure is actually on the table and not on my wrist. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and place the cutter so that it's flush up against that line. It could be either on the outside or the inside of that line. It's up to you. If you want to keep in mind the price of silver is a little high, I don't want to have too much waste, but I want to give myself a little extra room. So my cutter is right on the line. Again, now that it's actually on the line, try to make sure that your line is straight. If your line is not straight, I want to show you something as I rotate my plier or my handle. Notice that the cut here is straight, but my hand is at an angle. This is not what I want to look at. I want to look that this is going to be a straight cut. Otherwise, I have to recut, and then I have to file a little bit more. So just always make sure that this is going to be a straight cut. Try not to pay attention to this. Now I'm ready to cut. I'm going to go ahead and lay the bottom part of my cutter on the table. That's going to give me the leverage and tension and pressure that I need, and then push up against it. And now I have 2 flush cuts. I'm going to go ahead and put this one aside, and this is the one I'm going to be working on. I'm going to start working by filing both edges, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now we're ready to start filing. I would like to point out that you want to have really nice round edges, really clean and really even. Now, in order to accomplish that, we're going to be using a rubber block, a medium coarse file, and then I also use sandpaper, which is about a 400 grit sandpaper. I start by using the block for leverage and height. So by putting my wire on the very edge of the bench block, I'm going to actually start to file going downwards, not upwards, but going downwards. This block helps so that my wire doesn't move around and I don't have control, which gives me better leverage to get the shape that I want. What I like to say in my class as well is that I don't want to hear just that. I actually want to hear, you actually can hear the change that it makes when it actually starts to file. You can see the edges, the dust of the silver coming off. But if you're just tapping lightly, it's going to take you forever to get that. We actually want to apply pressure because we want to round those edges. Now I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing. Again, rounding those edges. Let me show you the difference. You've got some rounded edges there, and then those are just some blunt edges on the other side. I also, once I'm done doing the edges, I lay it down, and then I want to do also the front and then round it off to the sides. So I do from side to side, then I'm going to turn it over, and again from side to side. And again, that's just rounded edges and then smoothing out the front. Now I'm going to move to my 400 grit sandpaper just to get rid of all the burrs. I also like to mention that I use the flat part for filing and smoothing out the edges. Sometimes though, when you get a lot of burrs that are sharp, I use the rounded part for that. I notice that when I use the rounded part, all it does is grab the edges of the wire, the burrs. It actually doesn't ruin the surface of the wire. It just has that rounded surface that allows to just apply pressure to the wire, and all it does is it grabs the burr. So that's one of the reasons I like using a half round file. Now I'm ready to move to the sandpaper. All I've done is just taken a sheet of sandpaper and taped it to a square mandrel, wooden mandrel, and then sometimes, depending on how much leverage I need, I'm just going to lay my wire up against it rather than using the sandpaper to rub against it. So just going back and forth to the edges that just need to be smooth. So front, side, side, and back. Keep doing that until you have a really clean, smooth edge. And usually how I can tell is if I run that wire around the softest part of my skin or the most sensitive part of my skin, I can usually feel if there's any burrs. If I feel any burrs, I keep at it with the sandpaper. I don't go back to the file. I only use the file to shape, not to clean the burrs or to smooth it out. I go to the sandpaper for that. Once you do that side, you're ready for the other side. Now we're ready to stamp. I'm going to stamp the word party. I'm just going to go over a few stamping techniques. Remember the notch facing you is the letter facing right side up. In this case, we want to, because we're going to be stamping party, I'm going to kind of go over that again. We have 2, 4, 6, and we're going to count 7 because we want to space a little tiny space in between the party and the question mark. Since this is about 2 inches, because we started with about 2 1/4 inches, let me grab my ruler. You can see that. Measuring from that line to here, it's about 2 inches. We want to start, so we have 2, 4, 6, 7 letters or spaces, and we want to start right in the middle. So that means that at 1 inch, we're probably going to start with the letter R. So R will start at 1 inch, and it'll be A, P, and then from R, it'll be TY question mark. A little tiny space in between question mark. If you have any questions, please email Lisa Kelly. Okay, so now we're ready to start with the R, and quick measurement was the 1 inch. I'm just gonna make a little dot there, so when I let go, I'll know that's where I want to start. Starting with the R in the word party, I want to make sure that my notch is facing me, and I want to make sure that my letter is centered between the top and the bottom, so I don't want to have too much space on either side. I don't want to go too close to the top or too close to the bottom because you can splay the metal and it doesn't look nice. I like to be a little asymmetrical though. I don't like for everything to be perfectly in line. I kind of like for it to be up and down, but again, just not too close to the top or too close to the bottom. Now I'm ready to stamp. I'm just going to hold my stamp straight and give it one good strike. I have my R set, and I'm going to start backwards from R to the A, looking for my notch so that my A is facing me. Hold it straight down. Now if you're a perfectionist and you want everything to be lined just right, I suggest looking at our free stamping class. It helps to troubleshoot, and it shows you how to do everything in line. And but if you're like me and you don't care, then you can just continue. And party. I actually might do a question mark in front of the P too. So it will be like in Spanish. You know how in Spanish you have a question, upside down question mark. It tells you that the question mark in the beginning, upside down question mark in the beginning, is telling you that the sentence starts with the question. So we'll do it like that. And starting with the PAR, now we're going to the TY. That kind of sounded like a little rap, didn't it? To the P, to the A, to the T. Patty? No, we're spelling party. Okay, and then now Y. And now question mark. And this question mark will be right side up. So there's my party. And I'll bring it up so you can see it. So it's going to be like party. For those of you who know me, I'm Hispanic, so I do speak Spanish. So party, I've always known it to be like a Spanglish word, party, but it really is like fiesta, which means like a celebration, or conjunto, which means like a gathering. So party with a question mark in the beginning really is a Spanish way of starting a question. But party, the word party is not Spanish, so I could have put something Spanish there, but it just didn't come to me. All right, so now let's move on. I'm ready to actually decide where I want the hole to be, and I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can position that bead. I'm going to bring out some examples so that you can decide where you want that bead to lay. Sometimes you want the bead to kind of stick out on the outer edge, and sometimes you just want it to be centered so that the bead is centered with the edge of the wire. Let me grab some samples and you can make the decision at this point. Okay, so I have a few examples here I just wanted to show you. It really does matter how big your bead is because the hole is going to be in the center usually. So sometimes you'll have more of a lip sticking out, and then sometimes you won't. Sometimes your bead will be really close to the edge, like this one right here. In this case, even though my bead is really big, I still wanted it towards the edge of the wire, and that's just how I wanted it to lay. So it's up to you where you want to punch this hole. I believe it would be more aesthetics than it would be the wrong or right way. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just place my bead right at the edge, so it lays right at the edge there. I'm going to make a generous marking with my marker, with my Sharpie mark. And the reason I make a generous marking is because I use a screw down hole punch to make the 14 gauge hole. I use a 14 gauge hole because I'm using a 14 gauge fine silver balled head pin to make the rivet. Therefore, the hole has to be 14 gauge. Now, the reason I use a screw down hole punch is because this is able to pierce this metal smoothly and cleanly so that I get the right size. The inside diameter of that hole is going to fit my 14 gauge wire perfectly. And if you've seen the riveting class, you'll know that the rivet truly depends on that everything fits tight as possible so that you get the best rivet possible. And the best rivet is going to hold up, especially for rings. You don't want these beads to pop out. So 14 gauge hole is a silver handle. That's what we're going to use to make the this side of the screw down hole punch is what we're going to use to make the hole here. And then we're going to connect everything with our 14 gauge balled head pin. What I'm showing you here is that the hole punch is right in the middle of that circle. That's really important because if you hole punch your metal and it's off-centered, then your bead will be off-centered and you'll be able to tell. So it's not going to ruin the rivet, but it might ruin the design a little bit. So you want to make sure that this is centered, and having that Sharpie mark really makes a difference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate and show you that, see how the wire is level? This 7mm flat wire is level with the tool. So that actually helps guide you as well so that it's centered right in the middle of that wire. So not only does the Sharpie mark help, but also centering the wire in that tool so that there's no wire sticking out in either direction. Okay, now I'm ready to hole punch. The way I hole punch is I hold this in my non-dominant hand, and then I'm going to actually apply or screw the I'm going to screw the hole punch away from me anywhere from 3 to 4 times. And as soon as I feel it punch through, then I don't keep screwing because I don't want to mar the metal. Then I just back it off and I just have it, keep doing it until it comes off on its own. It's going to come off any minute. There it goes. Once I've punched the hole, then I'm ready for the next step. Once the hole has been punched, we're ready to thread our bead through the wire using our head pin. So you can decide which head pin you want to use, either your bald one or your flat one. And there's a couple reasons I do this. By threading the bead on there, it allows you to see how much space you actually have. In this case, I can see that I'm going to have quite a bit of space that I can still play with if I wanted to do some more design stamps on this side or on this side if I wanted to add another embellishment. And two, this hole has to fit the wire through very tight. But if it doesn't fit through very tight, or if it fits too tight, I have some problem solving for you to do. So in this case, the wire is too tight to fit through there, and that's actually a good sign. And I'm going to show you what you can do to help you bring the wire through the hole. So first off, if the wire is too tight, it could be because the wire is a little kinked, or because it was held in the vise up here. So I can use one of two things. I can use a round file and just go in there with a little bit of cut lube or water for lubrication and just open it up a little bit, going back and forth. Or you can just take your electric bead reamer, again using cut lube or water. And cut lube is better because this being a diamond dust tip, this metal can just rip that diamond dust off of there. But if you're using cut lube, which is a lubricant, and it helps protect that diamond dust, it reams it out without ruining your diamond dust. So if you'd rather just use your file, that's fine. It's just going to take a little longer. So again, just going through there, rubbing back and forth, and then turning it around. Same thing, going through there, going back and forth. That little bit should do it. If it doesn't, then there it goes, and you should be able to just do it a few more times. And in this case, this part went through easily, and it's telling me that this part's a little bit more kinked or flatter. So just keep doing that until this goes through. We don't want it to be extremely big, but we also need to be able to pull the wire through freely. Another thing is, once we're ready to actually rivet the bead on there, before the riveting actually happens, this has to curve slightly because that's the part that can't be formed with our tool. When this gets curved, the inside diameter of this hole closes a little bit, so then it tightens up one more time, and then we go back again either to the reamer or to the round file, open it back up, and then slide our bead in there. Again, I just like to slide our bead in at this point because it tells me how big the hole is, or how small in this case, and it shows how much more options I have on the front and the back. Now I'm ready for the reaming and then sliding the bead in and showing you the next step. So I'm going to ream it out just a little bit more because I noticed that it was a little too tight towards the top, and that's actually where it needs to be, is towards the top. We want it to be so that the bead is flush up to the flat wire, and then we're going to be ready to cut it so that we can rivet the wire on there. Again, threading the wire through there, we want to make sure that it fits through all the way to the top. All the way to the top. There we go. So we want this to be able to fit in freely, and keep in mind we're going to do one more step before we actually rivet it. We're not ready to rivet just yet. We just want to make sure that this fits. We can see that we have a little bit more space right there, so if we wanted to do any more design work, we still have that option. Now the next step is to I'm going to show you a couple of things, and one of them is, and I mentioned at the outset, is annealing the metal. Right now I'm just going to show you how much spring the metal has by applying quite a bit of pressure, and it's actually not giving. It's pretty tight. So I'm ready to anneal or soften my metal, which is going to darken the metal. It's called fire scale since this is sterling silver. Whenever you heat it, the copper and the silver makes a chemical reaction, turns black. So I do a couple of things. First, I like the fact that it turns black because I'm able to see, once I polish it off, I'm able to see the impression, the stamps and design work that I've done. And if you don't like that, then you have the option of doing a few things. You can either use a brush to brush off the fire scale. If you're using a brass brush, you want to use soap and water. And it does leave a few brush marks, but if you tumble your pieces, that comes right off. And if you don't mind having the oxidation look to it, there's another step that I do. After I've heated the wire up so that it's softened enough so that I'm ready to do the next steps of shaping the wire into a ring, then what I do is I use a silver black, which is a hydrochloric acid, and it works kind of like pickle. Hydrochloric acid eats like the first layer of the silver, so it allows me to polish it without leaving any residue of the fire scale on there. But if you don't like the oxidation look, which I can't see you not liking that if you're doing design work, design stamps and letter stamps, really the only option you have is to use a wire brush with soap and water to clean it off as best you can, or to use a pickle solution, which is another acid. It takes away all the fire scale, makes it like a white silver. Okay, so now the next step again is annealing, and then we'll go from there. So now I'm ready to anneal. Again, annealing is the process of softening the metal with heat. And the reason I do this is so that now that the wire's work hardened, I'm going to soften it so then I'm going to be able to shape it into a ring, a nice looped shape rather than all boxy. Using a butane torch, I'm just going to apply heat to the metal, and it's going to turn a light orange color. So I'm going to just keep the flame steady, and you'll see it starting to change color, and that's just the fire scale starting to happen. And you can see the orange already coming up. Once I let go of the flame, you'll see the orange. So once I get the color that I want and I can see it starting to happen, I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to go ahead and quench. I don't do it for very long because I do it in stages. I don't want the wire to burn. Everybody does it differently. Depends on how far away your flame is, or how close you are. You can achieve the heat right away. Or sometimes, one of the other reasons I like to do it in stages is because your wire may not be that work hardened. So in this case, after I've quenched it, I'm just going to test how soft it is by applying a little pressure. So you can see that little pressure, I can see how soft it's gotten already. I already know from that little bend, and I did very little pressure, I know that it's ready for me to go ahead to the next step. Now if you had made that little action and you felt it resist and not want to give, then you would have to go back and maybe do it for another 10 to 20 seconds until you got a really, like, not a light orange, but maybe just a little deeper orange, and then quench, and then repeat those steps all over again. Okay, so now I'm ready for the next step, which is attaching the bead. So once we have annealed the metal, again, there's what the fire scale looks like. It just looks black. I had mentioned that you can use a hydrochloric acid to help eat that first layer away so that you can go back and just polish it up. But you can also use steel wool, or you can use a steel or a wire brush, a steel wire brush. I'll just bring this in the picture so you can see what it looks like. This is a number 10. And that number is important. And this is a brass brush, also a number 10, and that number is important. It's soft enough to get rid of the fire scale without leaving too many marks. So if it's too rough, it's going to leave a lot of marks. If you're using the brass brush, you want to use that with soap and water. But if you're using the steel one, do not use water. It will rust. It will ruin your tool. So again, brass can be used with soap and water, or steel. Just the steel one can be used dry. I will go ahead and demonstrate what that looks like. I'll leave part of the sample with fire scale, and then the other half I'll just be using my steel brush. I'm using this steel brush dry. Everything is dry, not wet. All I'm doing is just brushing, and I'm not putting too much pressure, but I'm just brushing one part of the wire until I get that surface fire scale off. So you can see it starting to polish or shine up, and the residue that's left in the blank, you can still see that. And then doing the other side. Again, I'm not applying too much pressure, only because I don't want to create too many marks. Unless you like that brushed look or that brushed finish, I don't really press too hard. What I wanted to do at this point as well is I wanted to show you that you can use a pro polish pad to get a really high shine. So just by giving it a couple of swipes, or going back and forth to kind of help burnish it so you have a really high shine, you get a really nice, clean, polished, professional finish. Okay, so fire scale, no fire scale. Now, once it's completely polished, I'm ready to show how to curve the wire before we rivet the bead on. What I've done is I've went ahead and applied a layer of oxidation to the design or the letter stamps, because when I've went ahead and used my brush to remove the fire scale, it also removed most of the oxidation in the letters. What I used was a hydrochloric acid, which can be, their brand names are like Silver Black or Black Max, but you can also use liver of sulfur. And in that case, you would just have to heat up that solution and then submerge the whole piece. In this case, I was able to just brush on the Black Max with the Q-tip, and I just followed the directions on the bottle. It is now completely dry, and now I can go ahead and use a polishing cloth or a pro polish pad and just wipe off the surface, and you can see how the patina is inside the letters. So you can do that and leave it partly on the surface, or just remove it completely so that it's just really clean and shiny. So you can do that on front and back. And now we're ready to actually do the riveting of the bead. So let's get to the next step. So what I want to mention is, you saw me easily remove the oxidation with the pro polish pad. The reason I had to use the silver brush or the steel brush to remove the fire scale is because that is it's not just a surface oxidation, it actually goes deep into the metal that has to be removed. It's like a thicker layer, it has to be removed with the brush or with another chemical. In this case, we were able to do it with the brush. And then the brush, since it's a brush, little pieces go into the actual letters that remove that also that oxidation. So by just using the surface oxidation on the silver black or liver of sulfur, whichever you prefer to use, I only put that on the actual letters. But as far as the fire scale is concerned, that had to be removed all over the wire, even on the edges, and then I was able to give it a high shine. Now we're ready to actually attach the bead. Just decide which way your bead's going to face. Sometimes there's a front or a back. The bead slides on either the ball or the splayed head pin that you've made, the nail head. I just want to make sure that everything slides in smoothly. It should look like that. The next step is to take that off. Rolling it on this is going to give you a size 3. Rolling it on this middle step is going to give you a size 6. And rolling it on this step will give you about a size 9. Now, I never start in the 3 and I never start in the 9. I always start on the 6. I want to make sure that I hold it. I want to make sure that I hold the flat wire so that I can't even see the edge. I don't want to see it or feel it. The reason for that is whatever the tool is holding or touching, that's what it's going to shape. If there's anything even remotely sticking out, that part is not being shaped. So keep in mind, as much of that wire being held is what you want. I'm just going to just lightly apply pressure all the way around. And I want to do even a little bit more than that. And let me show you a finished sample. This is the part that we're shaping right here. This is a part we can't shape once the bead is riveted. So we have to shape this first. I'm going to shape that maybe a little bit more. So go from this is where we were, and maybe just a tad bit more. And all I did was bring it down just a little bit more, and that's what it looks like. Now I'm going to put this aside. I'm done with it for now. Now I'm ready to sight in my bead. Keep in mind what I said before is that don't be alarmed if the wire doesn't fit through that hole, because that hole has changed shape. In this case, didn't change shape too much. It's still allowing me to slide the bead in the wire through that hole. And if you need a little bit of leverage, use a tool to help pull that through. Don't try to push it in from the top. Don't try to do this, because then what's going to happen is you're going to bow that wire, and then you can't use this wire. So pull it in from the bottom. If it's resisting, you might have to pull it out, ream it out just a little bit, and then try it one more time. I'm going to try it one more time. If I can't get it through, that's probably what I'm going to have to do. I'm rotating it. There, I've got it all the way through. It's flush. There's no space between the bead. It's all really tight and flush. Now, in order to rivet, we need to have 1 millimeter of wire sticking out on top. So 1 millimeter is going to look like this. And if you can't eyeball it, what I'm going to suggest is looking at your ruler, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Let me just cut this. You want to make sure that you cut this so it's flush. I'm going to get just a little closer. So it should be cut flush, not at an angle like this, but cut flush and straight across. If you're not sure, I'd rather you cut it longer than shorter. So right now, I've already trimmed it. I'm going to bring it up closer so that you can see what I'm talking about after I show you on your ruler what 1 millimeter is. So we've cut 1 millimeter of wire, and this ruler is showing you there's centimeters on one side, centimeters and millimeters on one side, and inches on the other. So we're going to cut this between 1 millimeter and 1.5 millimeters, so almost 1/8 of an inch. Now that we have the right amount of riveting wire, now we're ready to actually rivet this wire down. So to rivet, we will need a riveting hammer and a bench block. What I'm going to do to protect the stone is I'm going to lay, turn this to the side so you can see, I'm going to lay the the splayed out nail head that we made. That's what's going to be touching the bench block, and that's protecting either the pearl or the stone, whatever you choose to use. And what we're going to be doing is riveting just that piece, or striking that piece with our riveting hammer. Keep in mind that we're not going to be hitting this flat part of the wire. We're only going to be hitting this part of the wire here. We're going to be hitting from top to bottom and then to the side going this way. So exactly how we splayed this part out in the beginning, we're going to tap, tap, tap this way, then rotate, tap, tap, tap that way, rotate, tap, tap, tap that way. And what that's going to do, it's called mushrooming or upsetting the head. So this wire, by using this special riveting hammer here, it's going to make the wire, instead of just flatten out, it's going to make it upset, form like a mushroom head on top. And that's what's going to create the rivet to push all pieces together so that the bead does not fall out. So right now I'm going to tap. I'm going to do it straight up and down, just a few tries, and then I'm going to pull it up so you can see the wire starting to form a little head. I'm applying quite a bit of pressure. I'm not just tapping lightly. Now I'm going to stop, and I'm going to bring it up to you to zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see that the wire does look flat from the top, but if you look at it from the side, you'll see that it's actually starting to like stretch out. It forms like a little bulge. I'm going to rotate it to the other side. Again, you can see it starting to bulge. So I've just striked it going in this direction. Now I'm going to strike it going in this direction. So I've just striked it going in this direction. Now I'm going to rotate it in this direction so you can see. Again, tapping, not lightly. And again, I'm going to move this out of the way so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see it really starting to take form. It's really stretching out. And so we really just want to be able to form that head evenly all the way around. Now I'm back to the original position. And again, I'm going to bring it up to the top so you can really see that head has completely covered that hole that we've made. So this is not going to come out, but I don't like how messy it looks. So what I do is I do a little added extra step. I like for that wire to be flush so that it's not sticking out and it's not pointy or sharp. So I put it back on here, and you can use one of two things. You can use a fancy riveting hammer, or you can just use your regular chasing hammer. Your regular chasing hammer, all you have to do is just tap it slightly so that it brings it down just a little bit, or your fancy riveting hammer, which does the same thing, only it's in the shape of a riveting hammer and not a chasing hammer. And it kind of gives you a really nice smooth finish. Now I'm ready to shape the other side and roll that towards the bead. Now we're ready to use our wrap and tap, and we're going to do it from the other side. Again, we want to be using the size 6. Doesn't matter what size you're making, even if you're making a smaller size or a larger size, always do it with the middle size part of the tool, and there's a reason for that. We want to roll as much of this as possible so that it's all going to end up at the same point. So we want to be able to roll it so that they both come together. If one side is small, one side is large, they're not going to meet up, and that's not what we want. So again, we always want to use the same size. And keep in mind, whatever wire is sticking out of the tool is not being formed. So you want to make sure it's completely flush. And then you're just going to rotate that. You're just going to rotate that towards itself. Now if you're looking at it from a side view, you can see how this side is getting a really nice shape. This side's not being shaped yet. So I'm going to stop there and rotate it this way. Now I'm going to hold it with the very tip of the plier. If you look at it from the side view, you can see what I'm talking about. And now I'm ready to shape the side that's not getting shaped. So I've just shaped that. It's not completely symmetrical. So now I'm ready to use my ring mandrel. My ring mandrel is going to keep it all the same shape. It's going to give it a really nice even shape. Now we're not going to be using a chafing hammer. We're going to be using a plastic or rawhide mallet. So by sliding it in the ring mandrel, we're just going to tap it into shape using a plastic or rawhide mallet. Putting on the ring mandrel is going to give us an even shape all the way around. We don't want to use a metal hammer because it's going to stretch it out and also texture it. We don't want to do that. We just want to be able to stretch it out a little bit by placing this flush on the ring mandrel, and it's going to stretch it out quite a bit, but we can close that up again with the wrap and tap. Now I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm done with that for now. I want to show you one thing. Sometimes when you go to rotate your wire, you'll notice that part of it wants to come down. So if you look at this closely, it looks like it's kind of coming down at an angle. I don't know if you can see it from this angle, but it has like a slight curvature going downwards. What I try to do is I'll use my nylon jaw plier, and I'll just bring it up just a little bit. You don't want to use a different tool for that. You do need a tool that's going to grab it firmly and position it where you want it to, but you don't want to mar the metal. So the nylon jaw plier works really great for that. Now I want to close this up. I've got the shape that I want. To close it up, I'm going to put it back on the wrap and tap, the middle size, and just apply a little bit of pressure all the way around. And there's my ring. Party, fiesta, conjunto. Enjoy your riveted rock band. Okay, thank you so much for taking my riveted rock band class. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned a lot. I just want to go over a few things. You know, you learned how to anneal the sterling silver so that you can soften it up so that you'd be able to roll it using a wrap and tap plier. Just remember those steps. If you don't do those steps in the order that I showed you, the ring's not going to come out, and that means that you're going to have to cut the bead off and kind of start all over again. So just make sure you do each step as well as you remember. Go back, and if you don't remember, go back into that part of the video and just look at it over and over again until you fully understand why those steps need to happen. Just so if you're uncomfortable using the annealing process, using a torch, it is possible to do it, but you just won't have the same results. So just go for it. You won't go wrong. Good luck. I hope to see you again in another class. Aloha.